Hey, I'm Doug, and on behalf of everyone at Revv, welcome to the fourth video in the D20 sound video series. This time around, we're working on using the D20s behind me as part of a stereo rig. There is a slight focus on worship, but not exclusively so. A lot of players who play at church don't just play at church. And playing in stereo, once you start doing it, it's pretty much impossible to stop. The ability to manipulate the stereo field is something that requires a little bit of strategy, which is what the focus of this video is going to be about. So with that said, let's get to it. So the first thing we're going to do is explore the three main approaches for creating separation across the stereo field. Number one, using effects. Number two, using amplifiers. And number three, combining them together. So let's take a moment and walk through the signal chain. I was coming out of my broadcaster reissue into the Dynacomp, coming out in mono into the Deluxe Memory Man where it splits into stereo. The direct out was going to the D20 you heard on your left. The echo out was going to the D20 you heard on your right. This right here is the blend control, which allows you to go from pure dry, a blend of dry and wet, and then pure wet, which is what we're going to be using on this next demo. So let's take a moment and talk about why you would want to use a dry and then a blend of wet and dry. For the guitar player, when you're using two amplifiers and you've just got one delay, that's a great way to get some separation across the stereo field. Feels good, and you're taking advantage of both your amplifiers. There are times that I've played with one amp just being dry and the other just being pure effect. It kind of wastes one of your amplifiers. But, and especially so if you're playing in the house of worship, your front of house tech is probably going to love the idea of a separate dry and wet signal. Why? Well, first of all, whether they pan them dead center or not, what it enables them to do is separate your dry signal and the transients of your pick attack for every single note you play or every chord you play, and get that to sit exactly where it needs to sit, whether it's for the duration of the set, song specific or part specific. Your direct signal sits exactly where it needs to without any of the other soup on top of it. In turn, if your front of house tech is really on it, then again, whether it's a set by set, song by song, or part by part basis, they can also then blend in the right amount of affected signal. More importantly, and especially if you're playing at church, we are no longer just mixing front of house. There is a broadcast mix happening pretty much for everybody that's doing church these days. So if you think about a live venue, and if you walk in there and clap your hands, you're going to hear the natural room reverberation. That stuff is not picked up, generally speaking, on your broadcast mix. So being able to have a separate blend between the direct and affected signal is a big deal. All right. So again, this next demo you're about to hear is going to be pure dry on your left side and pure wet on your right. And we're going to call that wet, dry. Let's take a listen. One of the things I also want to show you with the wet-dry setup is a great studio hack that you can use. All right, moving over into Pro Tools, on the left-hand side here, you can see I've got three faders. And that fader in the middle that's illuminated basically is a duplicate of the original dry track. So that first dry track is still panned to your left. But instead of panning the wet signal to the right, I've now got that in the center and I brought the level up. In turn, I took that original dry track, I duplicated that, and the duplicate is panned to the right. And I also added a 1 millisecond delay to that and setting that up as pure wet. And basically what that enables us to do is to have the delay in the center. Again, we brought the level up a little bit because now we have a dry all the way over on your left, and with a 1 millisecond offset, a dry all the way over on your right. Now, without that 1 millisecond offset, they would just basically sum in the center, and it would just basically be twice as loud. But with that 1 millisecond offset, panning them left and right, you now have this beautiful stereo field with the two guitars, one pass, but now you've got stereo guitars and the delay right in the middle. Let's take a listen to that. Moving over to my trusty Gretsch, we're now going to manipulate the stereo field using the two D20s. All right, first of all, the signal chain is as follows. I'm still running into the Dynacomp Mini and into the Deluxe Memory Man for the stereo split, but the Memory Man is actually off. Turn, I'm running out into the two D20s, both of which are set with the controls all at 10 o'clock and the gain boost not activated. I'm running both amps at 20 watts, and I'm using the direct out, incorporating a virtual cabinet model of basically the 112 open back Revv cabinets. All right, let's take a listen to both amps, basically set identically, pan hard left and hard right across the stereo spectrum. So now what I'm going to do is engage the boost control on the D20 you're hearing on the left to further manipulate the stereo field. And now you're going to hear the boost control engaged on both amps. So now what we're going to do is we're going to start layering these things together. For this one, I'm going to engage the gain boost on the amp you're going to hear on your left, but not on the one on your right, but you will hear the blended direct signal and delay on that amplifier. Let's take a listen. And now what we're going to do is we're going to add the gain boost on the amp on your right as well, still keeping that blended delay signal there as well. Now I need to point out one very, very, very important thing about using two amps when you're adding additional layers of gain. Every time you add another gain stage on a tube amplifier, the phase of the wave it draws inverts. And what happens is if you're adding a gain stage on one amp and not on the other, presuming that they were already in phase, they will be out of phase. And you will get phase cancellation, which is, without going super deep on this, basically means one wave is drawing positive and the other is drawing negative, and basically they cancel each other out. So the closer they are set to sounding alike, the more they're going to basically cancel each other out. So there are a couple of workarounds for this. One, if you pan stuff hard left and hard right and let your sound tech know that you're going to be having some phase changes, generally if it's hard left and hard right, it's not really a problem. You could also, on your DAW, or I should say on your audio interface, I've been flipping the phase on one of these channels each time I knew that that was happening, because I knew that was going to be coming. The other thing is you can actually go inside your DAW and basically take one of the waveforms and just invert that inside Pro Tools, which is one of the things I did on one of these demos as well. It's just important to point out that when you're adding a single gain stage, this is going to be an issue in terms of this phase thing. So, all right, with that out of the way, let's take a listen to left amp, gain boost, engage, right amp, gain boost, engaged with a blended combination of direct signal and delay. Let's take a listen. So for this one, I'm leveraging my Helix rack coming out in stereo to the power amp in on both of the D20s. And I'm running those at 20 watts. So I'm able to get the power amp essence of these amplifiers coming direct out, leveraging the virtual cabinet model of the 112 open back Revv cabinets. So I've got all that essence happening. Now, a couple of things that I'm doing inside the Helix that I want to let you know about. I'm using two different preamp models along with a Minotaur overdrive. It's basically a clone. On the left-hand side, you're hearing just the regular quote unquote AC30 fawn. On the right-hand side, you're hearing the AC30 fawn bright channel. And that's allowing us to, again, paint different sounds across the stereo spectrum. The other thing that I'm doing is on the left-hand side, you're hearing a dotted eighth note delay, and on the right-hand side, you're hearing a quarter note delay. That allows us to, again, further manipulate the stereo field, especially in worship. Why that's so valuable is it allows the vocal to just sit center channel, and we're framing that with this beautiful guitar. Let's take a listen. On behalf of everyone at Revv, thanks so much for checking out this video. Next week, what we're going to be doing is using the D20 as the epicenter of a switcher-driven rig, both with some cool stuff happening at the pedal board, as well as incorporating stuff like the 4-cable method. Lots of cool stuff in that next video. I look forward to seeing you then. In the meantime, thanks again for watching. Cheers.